Hey, welcome to Plant Yourself. I'm your host, Howard Jacobson. Two quick announcements before we get to today's show. If you're interested in becoming a health coach, I'm offering another run due to popular demand for people who can't make 8 p.m. on Wednesday nights, Eastern Time. So we're doing another run of the program, which will meet, the practicums will meet at 10 a.m. on Wednesdays, Eastern Time, U.S., which means if you're in Europe or Africa, that might be good for you. Also, if you're in the U.S. and evenings aren't good and you have free time in the mornings, either 7 a.m. Pacific time or 10 to 11:30 Eastern, then you can participate. If you want to find out more about becoming a wicked effective health coach, you can go to wellstartcoach.com. Second thing is, if you're not aware of it, Josh LaJaunie and I have a book that is free on Amazon Kindle. It's called Sick to Fit. And if you just go to Amazon and search for Sick to Fit, you'll be able to download it for free and read it on any Kindle-enabled device, even a phone, smartphone, tablet, computer, whatever. All right, let's get to today's episode. This is the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm Howard Jacobson of plantyourself.com, Sick to Fit, and WellStart Health. This podcast is part of my mission to help you live an active and aware life. Today's guest is a three-peat. It is Dr. Milton Mills, and this time we're tackling a topic that is a little bit hard to talk about, and it is about racism, and specifically racism in the plant-based and vegan community. Now, I urge you to go to the show notes because I wrote a pretty long essay about this in the show notes, which is plantyourself.com/357. And I don't want to recapitulate all of that here, but just to say that the topic came up because Dr. Mills and I, along with Helene Ann Greenberg, Corin Sutton, and Josh LaJaunie, were on a panel on racism in August at the Triangle Veg Fest. And specifically, we were looking at racism in the vegan and plant-based communities, not so much as, you know, the kind of racism that we think about, and we're actually unfortunately seeing a lot more of, this overt anti-Black, anti-immigrant, anti-Mexican sentiment, but a subtler thing, a more systemic thing that most of us simply are not aware of in our own psyche and our own lives. I've included a link to the YouTube of that conversation, that panel discussion, in the show notes. Again, plantyourself.com/357. And after that, a month later, I went to a vegan conference, and I saw someone there whom I've known for a while, a policy bigwig and a political sort of activist. And I mentioned that I had seen Dr. Mills give testimony before the USDA Nutritional Guidelines Committee, and he knocked it out of the park, and he was furious. He was angry about the inherent racism in the guidelines that encourage every American to drink milk, regardless of the fact that most non-whites are lactose intolerant, regardless of the fact that African American women are genetically protected from osteoporosis, so there's no need for them to consume milk products in the first place. And he pointed out, I thought incredibly bravely, that all 13 members of the committee who were sitting in front of him were white. And that kind of explained why no one was taking these issues into account. That explained the racism that was inherent in these guidelines. And I mentioned it to this person, who then promptly snapped back that Dr. Mills had hurt the movement, that he was too angry and that it wasn't effective. And I was too shocked to speak. And the person then went down the escalator, and I didn't recover myself in time to advocate for my beliefs. So I think this conversation is partly me making up for that lost opportunity. And I want to talk to us. I want to talk to myself, because I have a ton of racism in me. I have a ton of sexism, a ton of homophobia, transphobia, disability phobia. I have every ism that society has implanted in any of us, because it was implanted in me too. I didn't choose it. I didn't go and look at a menu when I was a fetus and say, yeah, I'd like to have all of these repulsive beliefs instilled in me, but they were nonetheless. And I came from a very liberal family. I have a photograph of my father shaking hands with Martin Luther King Jr. at a union event. I was brought up to believe that all people are equal. And in spite of that, I am racist. I'm sexist. I have these unexamined beliefs that until I really hold them up to the light, I do damage. As an example, when I was watching the video of Dr. Mills giving his testimony, I was looking at the 13 members of the panel, and I was not thinking, oh my God, they're all white. I was thinking, well, this looks normal. And only when Dr. Mills pointed it out did I see it. So I'm not holding myself up as better than, different than. I'm just starting to do the work. And I'm so grateful that Dr. Mills has become an ally of mine in my own growth and my own development, in helping me achieve my own potential. And so this conversation is an attempt to broaden the discussion so that others like me can benefit. So we talk about the Michael Vick rehabilitation scandal, where vegans are unwilling to forgive this big black man who did unspeakable things with dogs. And yet we're so happy to forgive ourselves for our contribution to the cruelty of meat eating. And Dr. Mills points out the tropes about black people, about big, violent, angry black men that permeate this discussion and color it, if you will, and how hard it is for white people to be in the presence of strong negative emotions from black people. And he points out that there's an entire book about this called White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. So I encourage everyone who's listening to this who considers themselves white to take a deep breath, be thoughtful, be humble, and see where truth lands. And I want to thank Dr. Mills and all of the other allies of color, people of color who have been allies on my own journey of growth and discovery and awakening. And my wish is that we can all come together in this movement, not colorblind, but in solidarity. Remember that the vegan movement is about harm reduction and about compassion and kindness for all. And we need to keep opening our eyes wider and wider to get that kind of inclusionary outlook into our movement. So before we jump into the conversation, two quick things. One, this is the last podcast of 2019, which means a new decade is soon to be upon us. And if you would like to make this the healthy decade in your life and you'd like some help, check out plantyourself.com/laser, LASER, for a year of my laser coaching. It will help you break with the past if the past included all the habits and behaviors that are at odds, in conflict with your goals, values, and priorities. It's crazy affordable, plantyourself.com/laser. I would love to work with you in 2020 if you are so inclined. Second thing is we are about halfway full now with the NOLA retreat, the New Orleans Josh Howie Sick to Fit retreat. You can find out more about that at sicktofit/NOLA. Yes, we have Sick to Fit, the real domain, SICKTOFIT. You don't have to type the number 2 in anymore. sicktofit.com/NOLA. It's March 5th through 8th, 2020, and it will be amazing. All right, let's get to today's episode. Without further ado, Dr. Milton Mills, welcome back to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Hey, it's good to be back. Always great to be here.
And I feel like I've been monopolizing you. We've had lots of private conversations that I have found very challenging, enlightening, insightful, helpful, and I would love to share them with my listeners, with the world. And I guess the big issue that we want to talk about is, like, we were on a panel at the Triangle Veg Fest in the fall on racism, and
right.
So why are we talking about this? Why is racism an issue, like, in the vegan plant-based community?
Sure. Well, it's an issue, Howard, because it's an issue in the country. I mean, racism is America's original sin, and it's because it's been here since the foundation of the country, and in a lot of ways, the nation built its philosophy and its institutions around and to support racism, and it's such a part of American culture that most people, particularly, especially most white Americans, just are completely unaware of how much it has become a part of their sort of training outlook, the way they've been taught to view the world. And it's important because it holds us back as a nation, as a country. It's important within the vegan community because, excuse me, it I think is in a lot of ways affecting the vegan community in a negative way, and not allowing the message to spread as broadly and perhaps as rapidly as it could and it should. I mean, this is just such a huge topic, but I mean, when I look at our current political situation, this is not the topic for this conversation, mind you, but arguably we are dealing with a president who is only in office because of really unaddressed white racism and its reaction to our having had an African American president. And unfortunately, someone was put in office who is literally endangering our democracy. But as I said, that's an entirely different conversation and not one we can have today. But for the last week, I have been engaged in very intense, very emotionally fraught discussions surrounding Michael Vick and his history of dog fighting, and
just for people who may not know who he is, or because he made news about over a decade ago, I think. Can you just tell us,
right?
Give us the the cliff notes on Michael Vick.
Well, that Michael Vick was I don't even remember which football team he was the quarterback for, but he was a very, very prominent and talented quarterback for one of the NFL teams. But it was discovered that he was running a very, very abusive and in many ways cruel dogfighting ring on some property he had, I think, in North Carolina. And many of the dogs had been treated very, very badly, very cruelly, very abusively. And when it was discovered, he actually was convicted of some crimes and actually had to spend 18 months in jail. It severely damaged and set back his NFL career. He lost years from his career and millions of dollars. And since being released from prison, he has, in fact, actually worked with a variety with several different groups to actively campaign against dogfighting and to try and educate people as to the just how I guess cruel and inappropriate a practice it is. But the current controversy surrounds the fact that the NFL has named him an honorary captain for the upcoming Pro Bowl team. And a lot of vegans, primarily white vegans, all of the ones that I have seen really out just, sort of screaming in anger about this, are very angry because they are saying that he should not be honored, that he shouldn't be held up as any kind of an example. But what really disturbed me about the tenor of the current conversation was that several people, many people said things like he should be hung, he should be burned, he should be...
Okay, so hung is not one of them neutral words.
No, it's not at all.
I mean...
that he should be burned alive, that he should be killed. Some of the most vicious things I have ever heard. And this is about someone who is no longer involved in dog fighting, who has actively campaigned against the practice, who, by all accounts, has reformed his life. My efforts have been to ask people, where is this viciousness and this vindictiveness and this vengefulness coming from? And true enough, a lot of the things that were done to the dogs on his dogfighting compound were terrible things, but in reality, they were no more terrible than the things that are done to the animals that are raised on factory farms and then killed and butchered for human consumption. They're no more terrible than the things that are done to animals that are raised to make fur coats and leather goods out of. These animals are routinely tortured and killed in the most brutal and inhumane ways. And the fact is that many of us, when we ate animals who are vegan now, had a part in just this kind of cruelty and torture and abuse. And thankfully, we have changed our lives, and we've repudiated those actions. And we feel that we should be allowed that change, that that we should be forgiven those past sins, if it were as it were, and allowed to move on with our lives. So,
well, I'm thinking about our mutual friend Josh Lajani, who
exactly.
you've seen his story. He puts up slides of the hunting and of the deer, and I've never heard anyone say to him or about him as a vegan that you should you're damned forever.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And Josh even talks about the fact that dog fighting is a part of Southern culture. And it's, again, we all, hopefully realize it's something that's heinous and shouldn't be done. But nevertheless, if it's something that you have been socialized into thinking was acceptable, it takes a certain level of enlightenment to understand that that isn't the case. And just as, most Americans are socialized into thinking that, eating tortured, brutalized, dismembered animals is okay until they learn otherwise, it doesn't make sense that, we're going to allow people to be excused for the things that they did when they were ignorant on the one hand, but then turn around and look at this black man and say, no, you must be vilified forever. Unless you understand the history of sort of the racist characterization and treatment of black men within America. And that has been the point that I've been trying to get a lot of these vegans to understand, that white Americans have got to begin to understand that, the fact that they try to be nice to people of color does not mean that they're not racist or that they don't have racist notions and ideology within them.
Right. So for me, like Michael Vick, looking at him and noticing my own reaction, because I definitely had a much more negative reaction to Michael Vick than I did to Josh LaJaunie. And so for me, that's an opportunity to say, what's going on there? Now,
Exactly.
Partly, I don't think it's an exact comparison because Josh liked his dogs, right? And so you shared on Facebook a thing about Chinese people cooking and eating dogs, and like there's something about dogs that will set people off in a way that deer won't.
In American culture, right?
Yeah, right. In my own heart. So like mistreating dogs feels to me like a worse thing than mistreating a cow or a deer, which goes to like Melanie Joy's point of, we love dogs, wear cows and eat pigs. So I'm already guilty of speciesism if I think that, right? But then if I say, okay, like Josh LaJaunie is so beautifully repentant and working so hard, but when Michael Vick does the same thing, so there's something about the way I see the black man as opposed to the white man that is, it's not something that I chose. It's not, I am not a bad person for having thought it, but I have a racist view that somehow has taken root in my soul. And Michael Vick is a great opportunity to notice it, call it out, explore it, and maybe do something about it. And hopefully get rid of it.
I was trying to relate this to someone on Facebook by talking about sexism. And what I said to this person is that I did not choose to be sexist. At no point in my life did I say, you know what, I want to be a sexist asshole. But the fact is that I am a man raised in a profoundly sexist society. And even though I had parents that, taught me from a philosophical standpoint that men and women were equal and that, no man has the right to abuse or mistreat a woman, the fact is that society in a million different other ways taught me the exact opposite. That as a man, I had more rights, I had more authority, more right to express myself, to be in a position of leadership than women, and that women were in, again, a number of different subtle ways, less capable, less intelligent than men. And whether I like it or not, those ideas were instilled in me. So the issue is, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to sit there and pretend they aren't there and deny it, and then have women have to suffer because of my refusal to come to terms with the bullshit that has been put inside of me by society?
And the fact that you're a smart, well-spoken person means that you can make them feel crazy for having thought you were a sexist.
Exactly. Exactly. So I have to take responsibility for the sexism that's within me. And the other thing that I have to take responsibility for is that even though I didn't set up this sexist society, I benefit from it. And I need to understand that and recognize it and realize it and do what I can to try and offset that. That it's not enough to just say, well, I didn't make things this way, and then just go about enjoying the benefits of, male privilege. Whenever I see women being placed at a disadvantage because of their sex, it is my duty to call that crap out and to say, you know what, this is sexist and it's wrong. And, I didn't set it up. I didn't, make things the way they are, but nevertheless, I see it and I'm going to call it out because it's not right. It's not fair.
Right.
And the same thing is true of racism. That most, white people who live today didn't set up this racist society. They didn't invent these racist tropes and memes that negatively portray African Americans in ways that allow us to be policed more heavily, to be incarcerated, more quickly and for longer periods, or to be denied access to the nation's institutions. But nonetheless, those things are real, and it is incumbent upon white people to recognize that and to call that shit out and to say, you know what, this is not right, and I'm not just going to sail through and benefit from it while I see people of color suffering and being denied opportunities that they have a right to just because they aren't white. That's not fair.
Right.
And and one of the it's very interesting because the evolution of the American attitude towards Black people has evolved as the legal status of Blacks has evolved in this country. So initially, to justify slavery, Blacks were depicted as the sort of simple-minded, happy-go-lucky, physically endowed, meaning, very, strong, muscular,
perfect for field
individuals
work.
Who needed to be basically controlled by white people because we weren't intelligent enough to control ourselves. Well, then when, the Civil War happened and slavery ended, there was a provision in the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery that said that nobody could be forced into involuntary servitude except as a punishment for a crime, committing a crime. And that's when the description and the characterization of black men in particular, but Black people in general, evolved to include the element of criminality, that we were at baseline malevolent and criminal, and if we weren't controlled and policed, we would constantly be committing crimes or raping women or stealing and being violent. And that then allowed, especially in the South, Southern Blacks to essentially be incarcerated at huge rates and then to be used by the state as cheap labor.
Right.
And then in the 1960s, it sort of evolved again to include this element of, well, they're drug addicts, and we have to incarcerate them because if not, all they're gonna be doing is out using drugs. What's so interesting to me now is when you look at this opioid epidemic that is sweeping the country, because it's not new. But when, in the past, it primarily impacted and affected people of color. And because people of color were kept in these economically depressed and circumstances that they found it very difficult to break out of. And, when people are in depressed circumstances, they often turn to self-medication. Well, when Blacks and Hispanics used heroin, it was deemed the result of criminal tendencies, and it was criminalized. So the response of society was, you use drugs, you will be punished. Well, now that since the 1980s, you've had this situation where the Republicans have essentially taken away all of the inbuilt advantages that were in place to help middle-class white Americans succeed, and now white Americans find themselves in situations where, the jobs that they could count on for economic advancement have been shipped overseas, and the institutions of higher learning are being priced out of their reach, and their kids can't go to college without coming out with a mountain of debt, and even if they do, there are no jobs for them. Suddenly, their children are turning to opiate use. But now, because white Americans always see themselves as good people, it's no longer seen as the result of criminal tendencies. It's an illness. So it's very interesting how the same behavior is rebranded and recharacterized when it's done, within the white community versus within the communities of color, because of this sort of habit and of characterizing people of color as being criminals and being bad and being inherently defective.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about the causality of your narrative is that it's all based on self-interest. That it's like slaves were a profitable business, right, and so servitude, involuntary servitude in our nation's prisons is a profitable business.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so it's almost like it starts with, like, the racism starts with, hey, how can I make a buck? And and then we need to justify with these stories of criminality and inferiority. Right.
And so one of the sort of the classic narrative of the malevolent black male is the big, muscular, dark-skinned, menacing black man. And Michael Vick is almost the poster child for that. And so that's why when, these white vegans are having these visceral reactions to him with this fury and this anger, despite the fact that this man has reformed his life, I'm like, whoa, you need to stop and look at why you're reacting towards him the way you are. You haven't even challenged yourself to say, what part does the racist ideology that has been instilled in me play in my emotional response to this man? And why am I not willing to allow him the option of having been reformed? Or why am I judging him so harshly for his abuse of this particular animal, yet giving myself and others a pass for their abuse of those other animals?
Well, yeah. Go ahead. Let's talk about another angry black man.
Sure.
Which was you in June, in front of the right? You spoke. You gave testimony for the National Dietary
USDA Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. Yes, sir.
Right. So I watched that video so many times. You know that I memorized the entire thing. I don't have it at the tip of my tongue anymore, but it was brilliant. It was brutal. And the 2 points that you made related to racism was, one, the panel was entirely white. And there was
with
enough
the exception of one black man.
And you used, you couldn't even have gone for the optics of tokenism. You couldn't have found your Ben Carson or your You just you couldn't. You didn't even think to go to the trouble of doing what every company would do in a stock photo.
Good. Right.
And the second was the dairy recommendations, which is the dietary part of it. Is that those are racist recommendations and racist policies that put dairy, which is a poison to most people of African descent, as well as most other people around the world.
People of color, period, because when you look at the prevalence of lactose intolerance, it's 95% amongst Asians, around 75% amongst African Americans and Native Americans, and the only reason it isn't higher in those groups is because of the raping of African women and Native American women by Europeans that have caused some mixing in of the genes, and then it's around 53% of Hispanics versus only about 30% of Caucasian Americans. So that means that you are recommending to people of color food that you know is going to make them sick.
Right.
And for what reason? For no health benefit whatsoever. That is quintessentially racist.
Right. So you gave that testimony, and I was watching it, like the first time I'm watching it, going, "Holy shit, this guy's got balls!" Like I was like, I'm fairly conflict averse, and so to imagine myself doing something in front of all those people, saying something so powerfully antithetical to the way they see themselves, and to call out the whole process as racist, and you did it vociferously, you did it with humor. But you did it with anger. You weren't pretending to be calm and, unemotional about it. And I have heard from white vegans, some of whom said that this was, you set back the movement by being so angry. And I didn't even defend you. I couldn't, like, my jaw was too far down on the ground to even,
Right. Yeah.
Tell me about your decisions that led up to giving that testimony. Like, was it you, like, out of control, or black anger is a very scary thing for whites.
That yes, black emotion is most white people find it very, very uncomfortable and very scary, but they don't have the right to deny that to us. And Robin DiAngelo, who's written several really, really important articles and an amazing book called White Fragility, talks about the fact that white people put this expectation upon people of color that we are required to make white people feel comfortable. And that if ever and whenever we began to make the white majority feel uncomfortable, that somehow we are perceived as doing something wrong, or we are perceived as being out of control. And I think, the one thing that anyone who would watch my testimony before the Dietary Guidelines Committee will see was that I was absolutely in complete control. But yes, the emotion did come through in what I was saying, and I wanted it to, because I wanted people to understand that these recommendations have real world consequences that cause real people to suffer real disease, and that's not benign, and that is not something that can be discussed politely, because it's wrong, it's cruel, it's unnecessary, and these diseases and illnesses are being forced upon these people for the sake of profit of a few individuals, and that is reprehensible. And the bottom line is that I think anybody who, let's say you were in court because you had gone out for a Sunday drive with your family and you guys were hit by, a drunken driver who, was on his third or fourth DWI, knew that he was drunk when he got behind the wheel, and he hit your family and killed your child. You might be on the witness stand and speaking in a controlled fashion, but I think everybody knows that the anger and anguish of what you were going through and were experiencing would come through in your testimony. And it's the same way with what came through in my dietary guidelines testimony, because as a physician, I see the business end of those dietary guideline recommendations. I see, as I said, the illness and the sickness that people suffer because of being told to eat products that they should never consume and that are going to make them ill, and that they absolutely don't need. And that is just again, and that the government knows is going to make them ill. And that is absolutely unconscionable and reprehensible. And again, I will not be denied my right to be angry about these things. Now, I wasn't throwing things. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't threatening to kill anybody. So it wasn't out of control anger. It was a very controlled testimony, but it was clear that there was emotion subserving what I was saying.
Right. Now, but that performance goes against our cultural celebration of what a good black man does, right?
Exactly.
So let me tell you what I learned about good black men from my education. So George Washington Carver, he did something with peanuts. That was cool.
Right.
Jackie Robinson, he just stoically took it.
Right.
Right. And then we have this,
and that's what people have come to expect from us.
And then what I learned was that, Rosa Parks and MLK were total pacifists, and they were the good ones, and Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad were the bad ones, and totally whitewashing MLK's, everything he said that wasn't, I have a dream.
Right. Exactly. And right, and it's hard for me to even articulate the emotion that I feel when I think that a lot of white people think they have the right to expect us to take abuse and remain these preternaturally calm and serene people. And I've come to start telling people that I'm not a magic Negro. And what I mean by that is that I am not someone who will sit up and take abuse after abuse and insult after insult and remain this sort of calm, serene, almost, semi-divine creature that is impervious to emotion, because that sort of gives people leave to continue the abuse. Mm-hmm. And people need to understand, human beings are emotional creatures. Our emotions are part of who we are, and they're there for a reason, because they help us survive. But they also help us to let other people know when something that they're doing is unacceptable. It's just as it is, like right now we're on the phone, but certainly if some drunk or guy who was like hopped up on meth suddenly came and tried to break into your house and start stealing things that he could go and sell, I don't think you would sit on the phone and speak to him in a very calm and measured voice and say, "Now, sir, what you're doing is wrong, and I don't think you should do that, and I would like for you to stop." You would quite rightfully react in a very forceful, very emotional way to put a stop to something that was very dangerous and destructive and inappropriate. And as African Americans, we have that right. It is not fair for white society to try and intimidate us into giving away our right to be angry at being abused and mistreated.
All right. And I think partly, in your case, and certainly, with Jackie Robinson, and that there's this idea, this white idea of black exceptionalism that allows me, I love Beyonce and Jay-Z, and Obama was fantastic. And look, Dr. Milton Mills, he's a doctor and he's a vegan. And there's sort of this like, at the same time in my mind, because I have these strains too. Like, I'm not trying to hold myself as enlightened in any way. I'm simply, forcing myself to look and understand what my reactions are saying. But there's something about like, oh, I don't see color that allows me to secretly be your friend and be, racist in so many other ways.
Right. And I can't even begin to tell you just how my mind almost just goes blank when someone says that to me, because they don't understand in any way what they're saying. I mean, I've tried to say to my friends when they say, when I see you, I don't see color, and I tell them, well, that's a problem because I'm black, and I like being black, and that what you're actually saying to me is that you want me to continue to leave a huge portion of myself outside of our relationship just to keep you comfortable, as opposed to you doing the work required to get to know the aspects of me that you are unfamiliar with, so that you feel comfortable relating to me as the black person that I am.
Yeah. Or that I'm saying that I don't see color because, otherwise you're basically just like a white person. Right. I can be comfortable in your presence.
Right. Yes, exactly. And I think the hurdle that we all have to get over is the realization that because you may have racist ideas and attitudes and notions that have been instilled in you through no fault of your own, does not make you a bad person. Yes, those notions, those ideas, those, images and attitudes are bad, but you didn't go out, at school and look at a smorgasbord of ideas about people and say, okay, I'm going to pick this one and I'm going to pick that one. No, these things were put inside you. So that part is not your fault. But and the fact that they're there doesn't necessarily make you a bad person unless you decide to embrace them, or unless you refuse to do the work necessary to get rid of them. And having racist notions doesn't make you a racist unless and until you decide to embrace those things and hold on to them. Just like, fortunately, in college, I had some wonderful female friends who, when I had the idea that I was not sexist, opened my eyes way. I mean, opened them with toothpicks.
Yeah.
and it's like, no, you have a lot of sexist ideas about how things should be or the way things work. And you need to stop and think about those things.
But here's the thing. I've had a lot of those conversations too with lots of different groups because I'm on the top of a lot of hierarchies, right? Because of my sexual orientation, gender, race, and what I've discovered, and it took me a long time to realize this, is when somebody takes the time to call me out on whatever incorrect notion of that my privilege has blinded me to, they are actually paying me a compliment. Because there are
Howard.
There are people that they wouldn't fucking bother with.
You are absolutely right, man. People that I wouldn't waste my time, because I know there's no point. And you're right. It's because people love you and think so highly of you and know your heart that they're like, hey, man, I need you to look at this or think about this differently. Because I know once you actually see it the way it is, you'll get it and you'll see things differently. You're absolutely right. That is a very, very strong compliment. You're absolutely right.
Right. And one of the things that I've gotten, I think I mentioned to you this, the author Ibram Kendi,
Uh-huh.
whose work I'm devouring right now, is, you know, he comes up with a very functional working definition of racism, which is anything that leads to unequal treatment, unequal outcomes. So it's, you know, ideas and policies, as opposed to, and he's not really into like this implicit bias stuff and institutional racism. He says those are ways in which it can hide and metastasize and nobody sees it. But like, so it's like, you're not a racist, but this is a racist idea that you hold, or this is a racist policy that you're benefiting from and not making waves about. And so, like, at a certain point, I have to say, either, you know, if the outcomes for African Americans and whites, or for men and women, or transgendered and cis people are different, then either there's something racist going on, or there's something wrong, something inferior about the group that isn't succeeding.
Exactly, because there can't be any two ways about it. And you can't just not think about it or just say, well, I'm not going to. I mean, when you see the fact that black men are 9 times more likely to be killed by white cops than white men, you can't just say, oh, that's too bad, and move the fuck on. You got to say, what the hell is wrong? What is going on? And why does that happen? But it's not just, why is that cop evil or why is that cop bad? You have to, as a white person, you have to say, wait a minute, what is it about the way white people view black people that allowed that white cop to do that? When you hear about some woman calling the police on black people, you know, checking into a fucking Airbnb, it's not enough just to condemn, you know, Barbecue Betty or whatever they're going to call this woman at this time. You got to ask yourself, you know, do I do similar things? Do I, you know, clutch my purse when I see a black man walking towards me? Do I feel uncomfortable if I'm the only white person, you know, within a group of people of color? I mean, these are all opportunities, as you said, for self-reflection and self-examination to try and get at what we all carry within us. But it's got to start with the realization that the shit is there, and it's time to stop denying it's there. The issue is, how do you get at it? How do you get rid of it? And understanding that because it's there, it doesn't mean that you are a bad person. It just means you grew up in a bad place, which is called America.
Right, and you know, we didn't want to talk about you know, Trump and Trumpism and the larger political issue, but I would like to say that, like, the idea is that, well, racism benefits white people, right?
Right.
And the truth is, I don't think racism benefits most white people. It benefits them compared to black people, but it doesn't benefit them compared to the people in power who are really benefiting from the racism. You know, the kind of the 1% who have everyone fighting over scraps.
Right. No, you're right, and it's the perception that it's going to benefit them, which is why so many poor and middle class whites hold on to it and buy into it. And that has been the great sort of magic trick of the wealthy 1%, was to convince the, you know, poor and working class whites that their racism was going to give them something substantial vis-a-vis these other people, such that they're willing to literally forsake their own good to hold on to just what are literally ashes. I mean, there are farmers in the Midwest whose you know export markets have been eviscerated by Trump, absolutely devastated, and they're still planning to vote for him. You know, for what reason? Well, you know, he's going to build that wall.
Well, it's I mean, I think it's identity, right? Like, at least I'm better than somebody.
Exactly. Right.
Right.
And it's a sickness. It is really a sickness that is threatening now to truly destroy this country.
Okay.
Because our democratic institutions are absolutely at stake right now.
Yep. So I want to bring it back to the plant-based movement.
Sure.
So, there a word that I did not understand until very recently was an intersectionality. Right. This idea that that oppressions compound and that
they're on a spectrum. Yes.
And they're on a spectrum, and that we can all be oppressed in one dimension and oppressive in another dimension, and that the aim is sort of liberation for all.
Right.
And so there's a couple of things. One is that the animal rights and vegan and plant-based movements is one of the few that takes this beyond just the human. And it feels like there is a way in which white vegans can be insensitive to African American history and concerns, whether it's comparing animal suffering to slavery, or like how can we do a better job of articulating our beliefs that are heartfelt and that come with sincere emotion without creating these fractions?
Sure. Well, I mean, number one, I think that you have to use some effing common sense. Number one. And what do I mean by that? Well, I have Jewish friends, and Alex Hirsch, and I don't know Alex Hirsch personally, but I've read some of his works, and he compares what we do to animals with factory farming and agribusiness to the Holocaust. And I absolutely see the parallels and the comparisons and the similarities, and I completely get what he is saying. And I think that the comparisons that he is making are valid. However, that is never a comparison that I would make.
Right.
And the closest I would ever come would be to say that Alex Hirsch, who is a Holocaust survivor, has made this parallel. Simply because I've got enough sense to know that the optics of me as a non-Jewish person trying to make that parallel won't work, because there's too much emotion there, and there's too much of an opportunity for my words to be misapprehended as denigrating the lives of the people who lost their lives in the Holocaust. Okay, so that comparison is off limits to me, and the same thing is true of the slavery comparison. I think that in many ways it is an apt comparison, but it's not one any white person should be trying to make, because it is, oh my God, it just looks completely wrong, and it just won't work coming out of a white person's mouth. Now, again, a white person might be able to quote, say, me or some other person of color who has made the comparison, but is not something that a non person of color should be a comparison they should be making, just because of who we are as human beings, it won't work. But along those lines, we also, the other thing is that we have to understand is that people from different cultural backgrounds have been sensitized to different things. And the like, for instance, a lot of white vegans are motivated very, very strongly and powerfully by the issue of animal rights and animal justice. Now, there are also a lot of black and vegans and vegans of other ethnicities that are also equally and strongly motivated by that, but not all. And I have seen and read posts, and I've heard people want to attack people who weren't as moved or motivated by the issues of animal rights as they were, and that is just not productive. It is not a way that we are going to enlarge our tent. We've got to meet people where they are. And if the point is, if someone is more motivated because of an issue of health, then that's where we meet them, is talking about their health. Because the bottom line is this: as the 300-pound vegan, last name is Carter. Oh, come on.
Oh, Dave Carter?
David Carter, thank you.
Uh-huh.
David Carter said something I always quote and never forget. He said, "Animals don't care why you stop eating them as long as you stop." And the fact of the matter is that if people stop eating animals because they realize it's better for their health, that will free them up philosophically and ethically to see the moral aspects to being vegan. Because once you no longer eat animals, then you don't have to do all of the ethical machinations that we as humans do to justify killing and eating them. You know, saying that they don't have feelings, or their feelings or their emotions aren't as real or as valid as ours.
Yeah, it's a pity. It's a pity you can go vegan on your own, but you can't like reverse institutional racism on your own. Like, like as long as I stop benefiting from racism, then I don't have to hold these beliefs anymore.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? Yeah, isn't that the truth?
But sorry, you were saying.
No. That's a very good, very interesting point. And I'll have to give some thought to that. So I think we have to learn to be a lot less judgmental, a lot less self-righteous, and understand that we have to enlarge our viewpoint, and realize that people from different backgrounds have different attitudes about, animals or different kinds of animals, and that does not make them, an evil or degenerate person because they don't see things the way we do. As someone said, you can't condemn me because my sins are not your sins. We each have our issues, and our goal should be to help each other get over whatever issues we're struggling with, not sit there and point the finger and say, well, I'm not, whatever, and so that makes me better than you. No, it doesn't. It just makes me different.
Right. So, how can white vegans, be allies?
Well, the first and foremost thing is that white vegans and white people in general have got to get out of denial about the racist crap that they carry within them, and realize that just because of the fact that they were raised in this profoundly racist society, that number one, they have benefited from racism, and that they have absorbed these racist ideas and notions, unconsciously, and they're there. And if they haven't done the work to actually examine themselves and and sort of challenge themselves about these ideas and notions, then those things are going to be there, and they're going to color their attitude towards other people, particularly people of color, and the decisions and that they make about these people, and the feelings that they have, both about people of color and about things they see people of color doing. And so they've got to come to that realization and then start doing that work of self-examination. And then they have to do the kinds of things that you're doing, reading books that help them gain that kind of perspective that, quite frankly, it's very difficult for white people to get when you are in a society that has been set up for you. You have to read books like the one you were saying by Ibram, or the book that I was referring to,
White Fragility.
White Fragility. There's another great book called The Black Image and the White Mind that talks about this history of mischaracterizing African Americans and other people of color to justify the mistreatment society has historically heaped upon us. Because until people start to really see those things, they won't see how they are playing a part in the oppression and ongoing abuse that people of color have to deal with every day.
Right, and I just Googled that, so it's by George M. Fredrickson.
Yes.
So
I mean, it you know what was so interesting was that I don't know if you saw, there was a couple of postings the other day that Michael Bloomberg, when referring to yeah, you know where I'm going, to Cory Booker, said he's so well spoken. I'm like, what the fuck?
Right. And
it's 2019. Are you serious?
Right. Really? Blackface is not an okay thing anymore? I missed the memo.
He's so well spoken.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I think, like, I would like to say to people who like me are striving to be allies is, so, like, celebrate when you discover your racism.
Right. Because
like,
then you can get rid of it.
Like, oh wow, I see something I didn't see before. Like that's an exciting moment. Like the moment you realized that eating animals was not cool, you were still eating animals. Right, and then you made the change, and so to celebrate when you discover this part of yourself, it's like, oh, like you go for a screening and like, oh, they found the tumor. Now they're going to take it out. Thank God. Thank God they screened for it.
Right. That's absolutely right. It's like, I see something I didn't see before. I can get rid of this shit. I can, it's like, you're right, because it is liberating in a lot of ways. And it's like, I mean, when I started to realize that a lot of my female physician colleagues were being placed at such a severe disadvantage just because of the fact that they were women, because a lot of the residency programs didn't want to pick them because the residency directors were afraid they were going to get pregnant and that they would then need time off for maternity leave. And so, from the residency director's standpoint, they were only looking at, well, we need to be able to guarantee that we're going to have, full, basically, bodies, a certain number of bodies to fill all of these slots throughout our residency program. And for that reason, we tend to, gravitate towards male colleagues. Well, and then some people will say, okay, well, I can see their point, except that it's like, no. Who the fuck says that you have to set up a residency program so that it's impossible to take time off? I mean, it's like that whole idea in and of itself is sexist. and stems from a time when it was all male, and the assumption was that these male residents were going to have women at home who were combination sex slaves, cooks, maids, and errand boys, doing everything for them, and that all they had to do was come to the hospital and just live there. And it's like, it's time to even rethink how we even structure our residency programs because they're so hostile to women.
Right.
And you don't just look at the system as it is and say, well, it is what it is. Hell no. It's time to say this is a patriarchal system that needs to be rethought and restructured.
Right. And not just for the women who want to become doctors, but for everyone who is going to benefit from a more diverse workforce with more qualified people in it.
Right. Because also, hell, men should be able to take time off to spend with their new babies and new children and bond with them. I mean, that's the whole point, that when you do this, when you make these kind of changes, it benefits everybody. No, that's absolutely right.
All right. So we can stop being in denial, and we can use things like Michael Vick, for somebody, Michael Vick was a wake-up call to their racism. For most people, myself included, Michael Vick and you were the wake-up call, right? So to be willing to be in conversation with people who have different perspectives and who might be able to see your blind spots.
Thank you. And to realize that basically, when it comes to racism, black people are the fucking experts. And that you need to listen to us. That, I don't get up in the morning and say to myself, how can I just piss white people off? Or how can I just make shit up?
Nor do you wake up and say, I'm not going to think about racism today.
Right. I don't have a choice. So if I am going through the effort of trying to point something out to you, it's, given my accomplishments, given my intellect, it's generally because there's something there. And you should give me the respect, to say nothing of the courtesy, of at least contemplating and thinking about what I'm trying to open your eyes to, instead of just, blowing me off and telling me, like I've been told, oh, you need counseling. Oh, you have anger issues. Oh, you're fucked up. Yeah. I mean, man, it's like I get to show you all these folks. It's like, I'm like, wow, really? This is where you're going with this? Like, when it comes to metaphorical distance traveled in this country, I'm the one that's done all of the traveling, but I'm the one that's fucked up and doesn't know his, rear end from a hole in the ground. Okay, gotcha.
Right. So where do we go from here? Do you think? I mean,
well,
like I'm like, one of the most interesting things I'm seeing is, and it's what I'm seeing, I don't know if it's new or if I'm just seeing it, is a huge African-American vegan contingent. Right. It's still like when we go to Veg Fests, depending on where, like the one we went to in the Triangle, it was like, wow, look at, like, this is a diverse group, like not just presenters, but people off the streets, like, wow. But, what does African-American plant-based vegan and /veganism look like? And how can we all play together?
Sure. I think that, actually some of the most interesting, I think, sort of intellectual work in this area, particularly within the subject of intersectionality, looking at the connections between animal welfare and human welfare, and how it intersects with, racism, sexism, and so forth, is being done by some really brilliant Black women who are writing on this topic. And there's AFCO, spells her first name APH, and I think her last name is KO. There's Brenda Sanders. There's Omowale Adewale, Adewale, is working on. He runs the Black Veg Fest in Brooklyn, and he's done some writing on. Omowale has done some really brilliant writing on this topic, and he's working on a book in this regard. So there are some really, really brilliant young African American authors who are writing and exploring this topic intellectually and as I said, just doing just brilliant, interesting, mind-opening work.
I'm gonna have to look him up for the podcast.
Oh yeah, he would be a wonderful person for you to have on your podcast.
Great.
And so we have to talk to each other, but most importantly, be willing to listen to each other and to step out of our respective comfort zones. And just really importantly, I mean, because I'm going to have to say the onus is really going to be mainly on white people, and some of your listeners might say, hey, wait a minute, that sounds unfair. Except what they don't understand is that for African Americans and other people of color, we already have done a lot of distance traveling just to be successful in this country. In other words, you cannot be a successful person of color without understanding white culture and white attitudes and white sort of positions about things. So we've already sort of traveled a lot of that distance towards you, which is why most white people find it comfortable to deal with us. So now it's time for the reverse to happen, for our white brothers and sisters to make the effort to move towards us and understand us and listen to us, and especially listen and realize that we're not just making shit up. We're not just saying things to make you uncomfortable or to just take a swipe at you. That if we are trying to raise your consciousness about something, there's something of value and validity there, and you need to wrestle with it until you begin to understand it.
Beautiful. Well, I've taken a lot of your time. I think I want to wrap this up by just thanking you, first of all, for your advocacy on all these fronts, for your friendship with me and your willingness to point out things that have been my blind spots. And I hope this conversation will challenge people, and I hope when people feel challenged by it, they will take some deep breaths and look for growth as opposed to trying to get their emotional immune system to reject the new material.
Yeah. Thank you, Howard. And man, I want to say, just to give a shout out to Josh, because Josh, more than he knows, has affected me in such just a beautiful way because of his honesty and the depth of his character and who he is, and his honesty about who he was before he became vegan, and how his ideas and attitudes and outlook on life have broadened and changed. And I tell you, man, knowing him has made me so hopeful and shown me that things I thought might not be possible really are possible. And it's like his friendship is a godsend
yes,
for me.
Yes, and I'll respond the way I think he would respond, is he's nothing special, which is a good thing because it means all of us have that capacity to change,
right?
Whether it's Josh or Michael Vick or any of us.
Right.
Let's look for and celebrate the progress and the good and the heart and the honesty.
And figure out how we can help each other reach that change and reach our potential as people, and realize that, none of us sprang as fully formed vegans from our mother's womb. It was all a process of learning and development and consciousness raising. And as opposed to condemning and vilifying each other, we should be trying to sort of enlighten and encourage and bring each other along. Because we'll get a lot farther, a lot faster with a lot more people if we do it that way.
Amen. Amen. Dr. Milton Mills, thank you so much for everything and for chatting today.
Howard, I love talking to you, man. It's always just a beautiful intellectual delight. So thank you.
Right on. Talk to you later. All right. Thanks for listening. That was amazing. Was it not? Intense, passionate, well-argued, and difficult. Difficult for me. I'm imagining difficult for some of you listening out there, and so important. I really want to urge you to go to the show notes, which is plantyourself.com/357, and start following some of the links. I have a whole bunch of links to the Black activists, the Black vegan activists that Dr. Mills talked about, to some of the books, to the videos, both his testimony and our panel discussion on racism at the Triangle Veg Fest. Let's educate ourselves. And to the listeners who are already educated on this because you've done the work, or because you are from these communities of color, communities that have been marginalized and trivialized. So first of all, my apologies for the lateness to the game that I come, and my humble request that you continue to teach me and help me grow my own potential as a human being. So if you got something out of this podcast and you appreciate the show, there's a bunch of ways to karmically pay it back. One is just to pay it forward. Let other people know. Post this or other episodes in social media. Let people know. Email them about it. Send people to plantyourself.com/357 so they can listen and watch for themselves. You can also leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. That helps a lot more than you'd think, and it takes zero money and very little time. And of course, you can become a supporter, a financial supporter of the show over at patreon.com. Just search for Plant Yourself, and that allows you to make a monthly ongoing contribution, which allows me to know what kind of funding I can expect so that I can devote the appropriate amount of time to growing this podcast, making it bigger, better, more powerful, more informative, more influential, and to continue this mission out into the world. I've got some good episodes coming up for the first part of 2020. Just finished an interview with Jim Loomis, MD, who is the medical director of the Barnard Medical Center in Washington, D.C., as in Neil Barnard of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, PCRM. Jim was also featured in the Game Changers movie. If you listen to my interview with James Wilkes from a couple weeks ago, you'll know the Game Changers. And Jim is not only a great medical doctor and researcher, he is a wonderful speaker. He's got zingers, one-liners, perspectives, and he's also a competitive triathlete. So fun conversation, and I hope you'll enjoy that as well. Also in the can is a conversation with my teacher, Sean D'Souza, who is not plant-based. Well, he's become vegetarian, but he is a teacher of how to learn and how to grow. He is probably one of the biggest influences on me in terms of my business and how I think about it and how I produce content. So there's something for everyone in that conversation. I also have just gotten a couple of interviews scheduled that we haven't had yet, and I just kind of want to brag about them. One is with Michael Greger, the author of How Not to Diet, the new book on weight loss that we're going to be talking about, and that should be coming out in February. And also a conversation with Mike Kaplan. That's MYQ Kaplan. He is a vegan comedian, and he is hilarious. So look him up on Spotify or YouTube in preparation for our conversation. Also, conversations coming up with Justin Luria, who has really interesting perspectives on the New Age and spiritual movements, what is kosher, what is unkosher, and how we can navigate in this world. Also, Todd Herman is going to be on the podcast. He is the author of the wonderful book, The Alter Ego Effect. You might have heard him on Rich Roll. If not, go listen to that in preparation for our conversation. And Shane Williams, a Canadian plant-based cardiologist, will be speaking with me. Also, that will come out in sometime in February. In garden news, we cleared up the last sweet potato bed now that all the sweet potatoes are gone, and are going to be planting it in clover cover crop in preparation for next season. In running news, been doing more ultimate frisbee now that the holidays are here. There's games when other people usually are working, so that's how I'm getting my steps in these days. All right, let's talk about thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace, as the theme music for this show. Check out willridenauer.com for more of his beautiful Korah music. And of course, thanks to all you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Here we go. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Morrow, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Scharf, Tina Ahern, Jen Volkanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elizabeth Feldman, Victoria Dolomanova, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Andrew, Josina, Julianne Rolnick, Sarah Durkis. Oh, I forgot Stu Dolnick. Sorry, Sue. Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Leanne Peterson, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzak, Jeanette Bennon, Gil Assert, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Doro Navizo, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jodie Friesner, Ruth Ann Thunderbrick, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, which rhymes with cinema. Nick Harper, Stephanie Holmes, Martha Bergen, Nicole Ramsey, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, Screwball, Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Ashley Corcoran, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch, Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurzel, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Coble, Shel Rudledge, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Brian Sheridan, Shannon Hirschman, Kate Rosalind, Ayat, Julie Lang, Home Hedegard, Isa Tuzanwak, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Aviva Valero, Heather Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Kelly Baker, Miracle, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justine Divitt, Joshua Sommermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Laurie Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Deb Casilla, Emily Iaconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Bicorni, Stephen Leenan, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Burry Elf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Tricia Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarie Hagan, Tracy Gullers, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Rochelle Kennedy, Joan Borstein, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael K., Holly Butler, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Param Ganchi, Amy Daly, and maybe you one day for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for this week. As always, that's it for this year, too. As always, be well, my friends. So if you appreciate the Plant Yourself podcast and would like to help support the mission of the show, there's a few easy ways to do it. One is to just go to wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review. Let other people know about it. Give us some stars. Give us some love. And that really helps us be found by more people. Something else, of course, you can do is let someone know about this podcast. Someone who you think would benefit. Send them maybe a couple of episodes that you think would pique their interest, or just ask them to subscribe in general. And third, you can join arms and become a patron, a financial supporter of this show. You may have noticed that there's no advertising in the show, and it's free for everyone, and it's supported, paid for by those who can afford it. So if you would like to make a one-time contribution or an ongoing monthly pledge, you can do so at plantyourself.com/gift. All right, time for thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song, Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenauer.com. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Heatherly, Mary Jean Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharp, Tina Ahern, Jen Filikanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Andrews, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby, Kara Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gil Lassert, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Torona Vizo, Gio and Carol Argentati, Jody Friesner, with Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harperson, Martha Bergner, Susan Amon, Molly Levine, the inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch, Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Copel, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Holm Hedegaard, Isa Tuzuma, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikowski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justine Divitt, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darmy Kelly, Laurie Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iaconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan McCorney, Stephen Leenan, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Tricia Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunn-Marie Hagan, Tracy Gullis, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Rochelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, Holly Butler, Diana, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Param Ganchi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Olga Sidorowska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owen, Sagar Nayak, Erica Piedra, and Danielle Roberts for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for today. As always, be well, my friends.